it's time to start. Welcome, everybody. This is our first Tech Talk Tuesday of the spring term, and this is jointly sponsored by Technology Association of Oregon. We are very pleased to have Margaret Burnett, who is our distinguished professor of Oregon State. She has been working for a long time on how to help humans use software in a way that is conducive to productivity, and she has worked a lot on issues about user experience for different genders, and more recently on how to make software accessible for socially economically disadvantaged people. So we're going to hear about all of that stuff. And she has several accolades, including ACM Fellow, ACM member of the ACM CHI Academy, and a lot of other things. So we are very, very proud and happy to present Margaret Burnett.
Thank you, Prasad. Oops. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I'm done. Yeah, I guess.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Be recorded, yeah.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And everybody who's on, I always like to see faces. So please, if you're comfortable, do feel free to turn on your cameras because it just helps. We have a fairly small crowd today. And so what I think is it might make sense for you to just chime in with questions along the way if you want to. And I guess the way to do that would probably be to speak up, because I obviously can't be looking for all your hands to be raised while also trying to project my talk. So you could just do that if you have a question along the way. And I think that'll make it more interesting for everybody. So, okay, to get started, what I've been working on for quite a while with Anita Sarma and many other collaborators, including some of the students that are on this call, are various systematic approaches to inclusive design. We have a whole method, meta method really, called SocioeconomicMag that lets us generate new inclusive design methods. And the first child of SocioeconomicMag was GenderMag. And so what I'm going to do today is just do a very brief review of what GenderMag is for those who haven't heard about it before. And then I'm going to talk about our new emerging SocioeconomicMag, which so far we haven't published anything on. So you're getting very hot off the press kind of information today. Let's see here, and it won't let me, there we go. Okay, so what is GenderMag? GenderMag actually stands for Gender Inclusiveness Magnifier, and it's a systematic method or process. It's not a software package, although we do have some tools to go with it, but it's basically a process, and it's for any kind of software practitioner, whether they're software engineers or user experience people or product managers or whatever, to evaluate their own software. And what they're trying to evaluate it for is to find what we call inclusivity bugs. Basically, these are biases in the actual workflows and user experiences of the users sitting in front of it. And they're looking for things that disproportionately affect some genders more than others. This little graphic here is an example of one of our collaborators who did GenderMag on their product. And as you can see, in the original version of their product, women ran into inclusivity bugs more than twice as often as men did. And after they had fixed the things that they found, and they found these things using GenderMag and then verified them empirically to discover this empirical rate. Anyway, after they fixed the things they had found, which was before they ran the empirical studies, both the men and the women had reduced numbers of bugs, and the gender gap completely disappeared. In that study, there were only 2 genders, but GenderMag works for any number of genders. It's not just about 2 genders. So that's what GenderMag is. It was first published in 2016, and its usage is spread really widely. We're now in, let's see, can I read that tiny little print? 33 states, if you count DC as a state, which I do, because why wouldn't I? And also 45 countries. And this is as of about a year ago, so we really haven't updated our count since then. So it's been quite successful. And so you may say, well, you know, how do gender and software even relate? And here again, we're talking about the user experiences. We're not talking about under the hood biases. We're talking about workflows and things that the user's eyes face. And so it turns out that software has these gender biased bugs in the user experiences. Now here's a worried software developer, and they're saying, uh-oh, you're kidding, where? And that software developer is worried because they already have a super busy workload. And the last thing they need is more bugs. And so the answer is it's in the software that that person is creating and in the tools they use to build that software. So that's bad. And so what are these things? Well, they are statistical alliances or clusterings about the ways people problem solve and their genders. So gender doesn't cause people to problem solve a particular way, and the way people problem solve doesn't cause someone to have a particular gender, but there are these statistical clusterings. And so if you skip supporting some way a lot of people problem solve, chances are fairly good that you are also statistically disadvantaging the gender that tends to gravitate toward those problem-solving styles. So here's the software developer still worrying, well, how much does this really matter? Do I really have to add this stuff to my workload? And the answer is it matters a lot, because every time a user experiences these things, it's like this huge cognitive tax that they're paying every time they run into one of these inclusivity bugs. So it's a big deal. So now that's the end of GenderMag. I'm going to now start talking about socioeconomicMag. And so what I've done is I've dropped in socioeconomic in place of gender on this whole slide, and the same questions apply, except I've added some speculation here, we think, because as I say, this method is just now emerging. So, so far we have very little proof that this is correct of our own making. However, it's all based on foundational research that other researchers have done about various socioeconomic people in both various socioeconomic strata and the kinds of things that they have run into with technology. So it's evidence-based, but not proven, if that makes any sense. Okay, so just to get everybody inspired, what might be another reason to care about this, even if you're not like an inclusivity person? And the answer is when you address an underserved population segment, what happens is you end up benefiting everyone. So the classic example of this is curb cuts. Some of you have heard me talk about curb cuts before, you know, those cutout places in the sidewalk. So way back in the day, there were no curb cuts. And somebody noticed a person in a wheelchair dealing with curbs like this, and they said, that is terrible. We must do something. And ... Eventually, curb cuts were born. And they did help people in wheelchairs. So yay, that's awesome. That's our inclusivity side being happy. And they also help people with those walkers with wheels on them. So, okay, our inclusivity side is still happy. And they also helped parents pushing babies in strollers. Oh, well, that's unexpected. And they also help people on bicycles. And they also help people pushing heavy bales of hay on their dollies. So as you can see, when you're fixing things that affect one segment of the population, it tends to make things better for everyone. And in the case of software developers, what you're talking about is better quality software, period. Okay, so what is this method? SocioeconomicMag stands for Socioeconomic Status Inclusiveness Magnifier. just as GenderMag is, it's a process that you use to evaluate your software's inclusiveness. The scope, which also is the same as GenderMag's scope, is when the user is actually problem solving about something. It could be when they're trying to learn something, like in electronic learning environments, when they're debugging, if they're programmers, when they're trying to come up with a budget, when they're trying to plan a trip, or even just a route using public transportation, or maybe Google Maps, whatever, filling out government forms, whatever kind of problem solving they're due, that's when it's in scope. And the status of GenderMag is it's almost completely unproven, but you can help with that. Looks like I messed up that animation there. Okay, so do we, though, really even need an SESMag? Well, let's just look at one example. This example is user-facing AI. So, for example, something that makes recommendations to you. Now, the trouble that so many people in the software profession have, or pretty much the whole human race for that matter, is that we're tempted to design for ourselves. So if we're looking at user-facing AI, then let's look at, well, who is actually building that user-facing AI? And the answer is it's almost entirely men, although there is this little tiny number of women. They're all college educated, every single one of them. They're almost all either white or Asian, very, very few in any other race. And they are all above the median compared to the US population in terms of socioeconomic status. So that is who they are, and that's probably who they're designing for, because that's the mindset they come into the whole building process with about what feels intuitive. So what are US AI consumers like? Well, about half are men, about half are women, and other and a variety of different genders. A little less than half are college educated, little over half are not. This many are white and Asian. This many are many other races. And right at the median are those who are above the median and below the median socioeconomically. So look at the difference between these graphs. So some of you may be thinking about your particular technology and say, okay, yeah, I can see why those other people need to worry about whether their stuff is socioeconomically inclusive, but mine is probably fine. I mean, it doesn't have insulting things about various, socioeconomic situations. So, it must be neutral, right? Well, that's the question. And then the answer is, well, let's find out. Let's use SocioeconomicMag to see if it is. So how would you do that? Here's how it's going to work. You start by picking one of the personas that the method offers. This is Dav. And so that's the one that I pick. You'll meet Dav in detail in a little bit. And then you pick whatever technology you're going to evaluate and some kind of scenario or use case. So here's an example. This is actually right off the OSU website. This is when people are trying to figure out what classes to take. Imagine Dav would like to know, how much a particular collection of classes is going to cost, because Dav has a fairly limited budget. So let's see, let me just move some of this Zoom stuff out of the way so I can see what I'm looking at. Okay, so here's what the OSU webpage says. It says your first year, may look like this, and it's got some costs here that it's figured out. I guess these might be tuition costs or something. All right, so there we are. Okay, and so then what we do is we say, all right, then we're going to pick the scenario, find out how much my CS textbooks cost. All right, so that's what Dav wants to do, at least what the use case that the developers were hoping that they supported well. So the developers pick that use case, and then we walk through it like this. So we start off asking the developers, if this is what Dav is looking at, and that's what Dav's subgoal was, or scenario was, what at this point do you want Dav to be thinking? And so the developers say, we want Dav to be thinking, I'd like to see each course's books. So that's the sub-goal that the developers were hoping was in Dav's head. Then as evaluators, we just say, is Dav going to have this sub-goal? And we answer that with yes or no or maybe and why. And we go dig through Dav's persona, which explains the way Dav goes about stuff to try to figure that out. See here. The persona talks about things like Dav's attitude toward risk and several other things. So those are the kinds of things we're finding out about on that persona. So we use that, and then we answer yes, no, or maybe, and why. And then we say, okay, we're going to push that sub-goal now into Dav's head. So we wrote down our answer, and then we're going to make Dav have that sub-goal, even if they didn't before, so that we can move on with the analysis. So then what we say is, if Dav has that sub-goal, what developer do you want Dav to do to try to realize it? Sub-goals are in the head, actions are in the fingers. And so the developer says, I want Dav to tap on CS 160. So then again, we ask, will Dav do that? Yes, no, maybe, and why? And here again, we look at Dav's persona. We look at a lot of their different things that we'll be looking at in a minute, their access to reliable technology, their attitude toward risk, several other things. And then we answer the question, yes, no, maybe, and why. We write it down. Then we make this fake person, this Dav, who's representing a certain bunch of users, we make them take the action because we can. It's just a fictional person. And we say, if Dav does that thing, will Dav see progress toward their goal? Yes, no, maybe, and why? And here's what Dav sees if they clicked on that. And so look, maybe this is working out just fine for Dav. So that's the way we do our evaluation. At each step, we ask the developer, what did you have in mind for your user to do? Then we decide if the persona we picked does that. So actually these personas, a persona is a fictional person. And these personas, like the GenderMag ones actually, are multi-personas. And so by that we mean it's a fictional person who is also customizable in certain restricted ways to represent a range of users. But the core of these multi-personas is not customizable. And that is the 6 facets that these socioeconomic personas revolve around. I've just listed them here. A couple that may sound familiar to those who've already seen GenderMag are technology, self-efficacy, and attitude toward risk. Those 2 are also present from a gender perspective. These other ones, though, are unique to the socioeconomic one, and we'll just get to know a couple of these because we're now going to get to know Dav. So here's Dav. This is the complete persona for Dav. And so one thing I want you to notice, please don't try to read it all. One thing I want you to notice is it fits on one screen. Yay. And the important stuff is in red. So this is good. And it has a little rectangle for each of these 6 facets. There's a top half and a bottom half. The top half is entirely customizable. So up here, the person whose software you're evaluating, up here, the software the person, the target audience, the target demographic is what you fill in up here. So in the example I just showed, Dav would have been an OSU student, perhaps low socioeconomic, because Dav is meant to represent lower socioeconomic people. Maybe Dav has certain background and interests and, takes the bus to work every day or whatever. So we just write in all those demographic things that make it fit our demographic that we care about for our product. We can pick any picture. Here are 4 that are suggested, but you can plug in any picture you want. So that is entirely customizable. Now let's get to know these facets. Well, not all 6 of them, but we'll get to know 3 of the interesting ones here. Starting with Dav's access to reliable technology. Now, the thing is, this is a really obvious one for lower socioeconomic users. So some of you may be saying, well, duh, of course, people in lower socioeconomic situations may very well not have reliable tech. And you're right. It is fairly obvious. So here, Dev has spotty access to reliable devices and spotty reliable internet access. Dev relies mainly on a mobile phone for tasks that other people might use laptops or desktops for. And Dev often finds themselves using shared devices or public devices. So that's Dev's sort of Facet profile. So let's look at some of the evidence that the foundational literature says about that. Consistent access to reliable technology that's actually well suited to the task you're trying to do, that's going to affect how people use technology, when they use technology, and even why they would use technology. And some of the literature says that only about 62% of households that are in poverty actually have computers in their household. Less than 50% of those households have internet at all. And many find themselves using public and shared computers. Okay, these things are going to affect how they use technology. Here they are using some shared computers in a public library, for example. Also, some low SES users depend mostly on phones for their internet use. So for example, here is a small phone, and you can imagine on this phone, they're doing things like trying to write term papers using Google Docs, trying to do whatever math or budgeting or whatever they might want to do using Google spreadsheets, trying to use a learning environment, for example, Google Classroom. So they're doing all that on a phone. So that leads us to some hypotheses that we've derived from this foundational literature. Here's one of them. The hypothesis that comes out of that is that people's familiarity with certain technologies and certain features are going to vary by SES. For example, higher SES people are going to statistically have more familiarity with the latest and greatest tech. But lower SES people are going to have the most familiarity with using mobile phones for tasks that other people require using a laptop or a desktop for. So they are much more flexible in the kinds of things that they can do on mobile phones. So what you're seeing here is different strengths. Okay, let's look at another facet: communication, literacy, education, and culture. So this one is slightly less obvious than the access to reliable tech was, but not so unobvious either. So Dav went to school in a low SES community. Schools in low SES communities are typically under-resourced, and that affects the quality of education and the types of education that Dave experienced. Now, as an adult, Dav rarely chooses to read lengthy and complex text. Some cultural and literary allusions that show up in various documents that perhaps give instructions or whatever are unfamiliar to Dav, and Dav did not get much tech education in the under-resourced school that Dav attended. So what's some of the evidence behind this? Text communication language is tied to usability across different SES strata. So for example, socioeconomic status affects differences in people's comfort with, say, for example, different sentence structures, different vocabulary, different literary or cultural references. So here's an example. This little thing that you can't quite see because it's small, I'm going to blow it up, and it's about a health savings account. So it's on a website where people are trying to decide, they have two choices for their health insurance. Yay, they actually get health insurance. This is good. And this explains how a health savings account works so that they can decide whether to do it. Look at the style this is written in. This is a wall of text the sentence structures are super complex with all kinds of, we've got this sentence that goes on for weeks of the sort that we academics write all the time, but not everybody is comfortable parsing them. And it's also talking about tax consequences, which may or may not be the sort of thing that this person is interested in. It's got, super high assumptions of vocabulary knowledge. And probably if we run one of those reading level checkers, it's going to come in as college level reading. All right, let's shrink that back down again. Now, one of the findings is that actually multimodal communications can really help support multiple literacy levels and also minority cultures. And minority cultures also are disproportionately larger in lower socioeconomic communities. So here are just a few examples. Here's, of course, our text. That's one example of a mode of communication. And here is a visualization that explains, say, for example, a route using a nice visualization that actually spells it out quite nicely. And then, of course, there could be a video explaining things like this too. So supporting multiple modes is a way forward to supporting multiple socioeconomic strata. Okay, and that leads us to a couple of hypotheses. Actually, we have more, but here are a couple. One is that tech that's mindful of diverse literacy backgrounds and education is going to turn out to be more socioeconomic inclusive. So here you've got a little sort of notional diagram of different modes, different ways people can go about learning this information or going about figuring it out. That sort of thing is a way forward. Also, another hypothesis is that tech that can reflect the user's own culture will be more socioeconomic inclusive. So here's one fairly recent example. You can now choose the skin color of your little icon. Here's another example. Here they've got free tech support in a variety of languages, and they're giving some pictures to make people see that, yes, they really mean it. It's not just a bunch of white people who have learned some language in high school. And here's a multicultural learning game for home builders, it's called. And so I can see, an adobe house, and there's an igloo, and there's a log cabin. And so all these different styles of houses so that people can feel like, oh, that's my kind of house. Okay, one more here. So DAV's attitude toward technology's privacy and security. So DAV is very protective of their location and identity because, first of all, a lot of times, many of them use mostly shared devices, which is reason for extra caution. DAV has some negative experiences from living or working in high surveillance environments. Low SES communities tend to have very high surveillance as compared to higher socioeconomic communities, and experiences with credit card debt and identity theft, and so on. So, evidence. So everybody has privacy and security problems. We know that. But lower socioeconomic users have more. Identity theft, some low SES demographics have more than 3 times as much identity theft happening in their lives. Of course, they're also faced with oftentimes using outmoded hardware or software, which of course will have more security unpatched leaks than more up-to-date hardware or software. Of course, they're living in these high surveillance neighborhoods with security cameras everywhere on every, shop front and stoplight and all over the place. And furthermore, if they have to share devices, they may not actually trust the people that they have to share their devices with. For example, if you're a teenage boy and you have to share your device with everybody in your family, maybe you just assume that they couldn't see some of the things that you're looking at or some of the things that you're saying. So this doesn't have to mean they have an adverse relationship, but they're just some things you don't want to share. And all of these things, of course, affect their usage. For example, some lower SES people avoid technology whenever possible for privacy and security reasons, primarily. Some avoid all social media for the same reason. Some delete often and extensively to prevent surveillance and other people discovering things. So if they're using a shared device, they may do something on social media, and then they may immediately, delete their profile or very shortly thereafter. So all of these things are different styles of usage. Here's one quote from one paper about this, which, just chills me down to my very soul. Privacy is not for me. It's for those rich women. Let's see here. Okay. So here are some hypotheses that we derive from some of this literature. Users' perceptions of certain tech features as having privacy and security risks will vary by socioeconomic status. For example, things that pick up people's locations and say, is it okay if we pick up your location? You see these all the time on various websites asking you that. Lower SES people statistically would be less likely to be okay with that than higher SES people. Another hypothesis. Users' usage of those very tech features will vary by SES in the same way as in H1. This is their perceptions. This is the usage that comes out of those perceptions. So the thing is, we've gone through 3 of these facets now. There are 3 others that we won't go through today. But what this says is not only that things are doom and gloom, it says that if you have a way to find things like that in your own software, then and only then can you fix them. And so, for example, back to that unreliable technology, some of the literature has contributed some solutions. And so here, one paper talks about making apps both phone friendly and desktop friendly. That would be a way to increase the number of socioeconomic strata that you might be able to support. Support offline sharing for when tech access is unreliable. Support voice-based systems to eliminate the cost of screen reader software. So those are just some of the examples from the literature on that facet. Literacy, education, and culture. There are several recommendations that came out of the literature for that. Let's see, adding visuals, using plain language, design activities that don't require culturally specific knowledge, diverse cultures and linguistic backgrounds, and finally, privacy and security. Some of the recommendations from the literature are protect certain communication channels from surveillance, and support on-demand information hiding by the user. So, so that's the kind of thing that's emerging from the literature. So here are some calls for action. Here are things you can do right now. You can try it on your own technology and tell us how it goes. Or you could do that and help our research by letting us come and watch. That would be awesome. Or you can collaborate by also gathering before and after data on how socioeconomic diverse people fare when using your technology. Or you could fully collaborate by bringing us bags of money to fund us to work with you more fully. So yeah, join in. Right now, there's like nothing you can download. There's like nothing you can read because it's just emerging. We haven't published anything, although we're working on that. And so you can just send me email, or you can go look at GenderMag if that's what you're interested in, which has loads of resources. So I think I will get out of this presentation mode so that I can see the chat. And maybe I'll stop sharing. Questions?
Thank you, Margaret. It's a great talk. Yeah. So let's look at the questions. I have one question I can start off with maybe. So yeah, I see your kind of carbonology is very interesting. So I think the idea is that if you can help these people have some maybe different genders and so on, it would help everybody kind of idea. But is it not possible that maybe if you are helping someone else may be annoyed by that and you have to somehow make a compromise between different tastes?
So yeah, that's an awesome question, Prasad, and the answer is emphatically no. So the difference between inclusive design, which is what I'm pushing here, and say, for example, accessibility, is that what we're trying to do is design for a broader spectrum of people. And what we're absolutely not trying to do is push designing for just this side or just this side or some sort of dreaded middle in which nobody is happy. So we're really just, taking software that's designed for this tiny little group of population and try to stretch that boundary so that fewer people are experiencing barriers. So we want to be curb cuts.
Right. Yeah.
Margaret,
I was
Will
thinking
here.
of an idea where maybe this is a bit of a stretch, but I was wondering if it's possible to adapt your interface based on users' tastes and requirements. So somebody might want more visual, somebody might want more text. You might, first of all, figure out what they want and then try to kind of push them towards one interface or the other. Does that kind of thing work?
Well, people ask me that sort of question a lot, and I don't tend to love the approach, but that doesn't mean it's entirely all wet. The thing that I don't love about it, well, two things I don't love about it. The first thing I don't love about it is it tends to pigeonhole people. And so what I really believe is super important for society and therefore super important for tech, because tech does so much shaping of society, is diversity of thought. And so what we really want is not only lots of people who think differently, we want to support that and not to try to stamp it out by making everybody go here or here or here. And we even want that diversity of thought within individuals. So pigeonholing someone, oh, I see you like visuals. From now on, I'm just going to feed you visuals, is sort of getting them locked into their little boxes too, and not letting them think about things from different perspectives. So sort of a, so that I guess is the combination of reasons why I don't really love it. What I would really like to see instead is a lot of flexibility where a user can go where they want to go at the moment, depending on what they need at the moment. And so a great example of that from the GenderMag project, it doesn't have applicability to the SocioeconomicMag project, but the GenderMag project, one of the things that it showed was talked about was the gender differences in people's information processing style. So statistically, women are more likely to want to gather a lot of information about a problem before they start solving it. And this, of course, is only clusters of statistics, not some sort of all women are like this, but these bubbles. Whereas on the other side of the coin, the style of gathering just a little and then acting upon it, and then just a little and acting upon it, and that sort of very incremental style is statistically more clustered around men. And so tooltips are perfect for that sort of person, for the gather just a little act, but it totally leaves the comprehensive information gatherers out. And so a solution is, if tooltips could be expandable and pinnable, then people could go about it however they wanted. The people who want the incremental thing are just using tooltips in the same way they always have. The people who are more comprehensive could pin them and expand them and have more and more and more information until they don't want it anymore, and then they could dismiss it. So it's that sort of fluidity that is really sense. What we're advocating. And I know Will's been waiting a long time to ask his question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Will is, go ahead.
Well, I put my question in chat and Tina answered it. So, but in short, I'm thrilled. I've seen you present before, back when I was live at HP, and I'm gonna take your recording and poke some of my former colleagues and try to get them to take advantage of the resource and maybe go as far as participating in your research.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Thank you, Will.
This is really great.
Thank you.
think Jill has a question in chat. I don't know if she can ask.
Oh, let's see. Jill, how do you, let's see, between changing software versus an inherent alternate approach that has been traditionally biased? Jill, I don't think I entirely understand it. Could you help?
Oh, sure. Sorry. I'm just curious about, like, when you work with software developers, how often, or if you've worked with software developers, how often do you get an understanding that perhaps what has been done in the past has been done through a certain lens? And what does it take to change that perception and have people be open to your approach?
Oh, that's a super great question, Jill. And I'm just wondering if I can call on Sarah to answer it. Sarah, are you still here? There you are. Sarah, will you answer it?
Yes, and Jill, can you repeat your question? I have construction going on in my house and they like started drilling something right when you were talking at the end. So I lost your last bit. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no worries. I hope I can. I was wondering, when you work with software developers, how often is there a perception that what is there meets needs, and how often do you need to have kind of work with people to discuss the fact that there might be some inherent biases to have them open to using a tool like yours?
Yeah, so thank you, Dr. Burnett. So actually, quick intro. My name is Sarah Morris. I'm the Chief Product Officer of a small nonprofit in the Seattle area. We build software to support rapid diagnostic testing in low and middle income countries for HIV, malaria, COVID, things like that. But previously, and where I'd worked with Dr. Burnett in the past was in my capacity on the inclusive design team at Microsoft for a number of years. And then in between these two roles, spent time at Facebook and have taken all of the work that I was so lucky to do with Dr. Burnett on GenderMag into Microsoft, at Facebook, and now into my role at Outerray. So lots and lots of experience working with engineers on this. I'll say a couple of things. First, I think so much of it is around the storytelling. I think when you first approach kind of bringing this inclusivity angle, people immediately have a reaction, you know, just like Dr. Burnett teed up, which is, oh my gosh, is this going to increase my workload? Are there more features I need to build? You know, things like that. And it's not until they start seeing the negative consequences of not taking an inclusive approach that they really come to the table. So at Microsoft, for example, the way this showed up was we launched Windows 10 and they started getting back the net promoter scores, and it was like women hated Windows. And the leadership team was like, why do women hate our product? And, you know, when we actually brought in this research and stepped back, it wasn't that women hated the product. It was that people with different learning styles could not use the product. It was built for people who tinker to learn. And so by showing the distributions of different learning styles, people could wrap their head around the problem in a new way. So I think so much of it is storytelling. And so the approach that we had taken was really around, we build a product that aims to serve the whole planet. And there's 7.7 billion people. Everybody has diverse needs and styles and abilities and socioeconomic statuses. And those change throughout the day, throughout your life, and the way that people interact with the product changes accordingly. And so we framed it up as, this isn't about, you know, changing or adding new features. It's really about introducing a diversity of ways for different people to participate and get what they need out of it. And what I found was actually through bringing real users with diverse backgrounds and having the engineers participate in a workshop where they sit face to face. I realize with COVID, this is much harder, but when they sit face to face and they are empowered to actually talk directly to the users of your product with varying needs, they actually get more inspired and more excited about the program. Like, we actually found inclusive design to be a huge morale booster for the team, because especially right now when so much is going on in the world and it's so awful, and a lot of people at for-profit companies are like, what am I doing here? Am I contributing? You can actually use this as a great way to get people to rally and see that they're doing a better, a service for the world and reducing barriers for more people. So happy to chat more. This was something we worked for a long time on, and I won't say that I've like solved the challenge, intimately, but yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I see a question from Scanned about people being privacy conscious. Scanned, it's a great question. It's what I was thinking too. To summarize what Scanned said here in this question, Scanned, are you here? Do you want to summarize it yourself? Let's see, I don't see. Maybe they're gone now. Anyway, they said
he's there, but yeah, maybe his phone is not working or something. You can go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So one would think indeed that people with less technology education, which would disproportionately be lower socioeconomic because of less education being available to them, would maybe not be so very privacy savvy. But it's called to their attention all the time in their daily lives. And so on that slide, I pointed out, for example, the greater rate of identity theft. So, if you or your friend or your brother or whatever, are constantly hearing tales of identity theft and credit card theft and, people taking over your social media identity and that sort of thing to ill effect, you're thinking about privacy, even if you don't have that much tech background. So I was just as surprised as you were to find this out. Other questions?
I actually had raised my hand to ask you a real question, but
yeah, go for it.
That's okay. So I was going to ask, a lot of the work that we had done together previously, and it sounds like here is very US focused, and where I saw a really interesting alignment is, in some work that we have done in Kenya and Nigeria with community health workers. We've run some malaria testing programs and have a body of data that we're sifting through right now, working on kind of publications. So it might be a really interesting opportunity for us to collaborate because, as you were talking, one of the insights that occurred to me was we have discovered some really interesting behavior among health workers where they are not following protocols and we're making assumptions around why they're doing these certain things, but basically not administering malaria tests correctly. And what we see is some of the more egregious kind of abuses of not following that behavior is more prevalent with higher educated, longer tenured people that have been doing this work and people who tend to work in like private clinics versus the volunteer community health workers in the field. And so we are actually seeing some interesting disparities between the way that people are behaving given their socioeconomic background. And so I thought this could be a really interesting alignment, and I hadn't thought of it from this exact angle yet. So something we should follow up on.
Yeah, this sounds awesome. We're just starting a collaboration with a group called MOSIP. Maybe you've heard of them. They too are serving various developing countries in, I think primarily in Africa, but a few other places too. So far, our collaboration is just sort of fledgling hatching of the egg. So we don't have any data with them yet, but who knows, it seems like some of the things you're pointing to, some of that data may actually be of interest to them too, and vice versa. So yes, we should definitely stay in touch on this.
Margaret, what was the name of that company you mentioned?
Just MOSIP. Yeah, it's not actually a company. It's what are they? A foundation. They are an organization that are working with several third world countries who need to use some sort of national identity ID in order to provide social services to various needy people. And so this organization is helping them. They've got this open source platform that they're trying to make sure is inclusive. So anyway, we're just starting a potential collaboration. We haven't gotten very far on it, but if you can look it up. Let's see, I'll just put
I'm
it
having trouble understanding how it's spelled.
There it is. It's in the chat.
I think Rupika had her hand up.
Hi, Rupika.
Hi, Dr. V. Thanks for the great talk. So I had a question about one of the slides that you had posted towards the end that was outlining proposal solutions for, bridging these gaps in like software. And so I was wondering if you found any research from like your lit review where, like where folks might have actually used these solutions and, how like the before and after look like, or is that something that you're planning to do with your work?
Well, what we're planning to do with our work has yet to be seen because we're at the beginning of our journey. But these solutions do come out of other people's research, the ones that I posted. And usually that research has been very specific. So the answer is both yes and no. Yes, there's at least some evidence that it worked there, but the population was usually super intersectional and super specific, like, young people who live, in some neighborhood in Chicago, who, are trying to get their GED or just something super specific. So these are more like a smorgasbord of tastes you can try rather than things that we can just hang our hats on and be done with it.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think Will had a comment about applying this to non-software processes.
Oh, I didn't see that. Did I miss a? Right. Yeah. Sure. It's applicable really to any technology. So anything in which you've got something hitting a user's eyes where that user is trying to solve some kind of problem is actually applicable. And so that certainly includes, hardware devices and robots and consoles on machines. And, it also includes pretty much anything with pixels. So websites, whether or not they have any kind of, JavaScript behind them, but just plain old static websites, even documents, people have found GenderMag to help. And so we expect the same of SocioeconomicMag because these facets are all about people reasoning about stuff.
I was relating to recently, I got a vaccine booster and just the process of walking in and the signage and such. It's actually kind of a positive feature that you're not like software plug-in blocks, and maybe with a little creative adaptation, a process like that could become, could be systematically analyzed and made more inclusive with the work you've done. And it was, Sarah kind of put the idea in my head, so that's wonderful.
Yeah. That's I remember a quote from one of our studies where somebody went to the gym and said, I totally had an Abby moment at the gym. And I'm not sure if she was referring to the fancy machines and the console on there, or just the workflow of getting, from the locker room to the pool or whatever. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, very interesting talk.
Okay.
I think we are out of questions. So thank you very much and look forward to the next talk 2 weeks from now, I guess.
Oh, yeah, right. The next tech talk, but not mine. Yes, but I'll look forward to it.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.